Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Larnice McCoy-Moore, and it is my pleasure to facilitate today's meeting. The purpose of this comment gathering meeting, held by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC staff, is to describe the staff's efforts in assessing environmental justice, or EJ, in NRC's programs, policies, and activities as directed by the Commission in Staff Requirements Memorandum, a session number ML21113A070. I want to thank you for attending the meeting. We are near the end of our review process, and your comments are important to the NRC's assessment of environmental justice. Your comments will be considered carefully and help shape our efforts. This is a comment gathering meeting by the NRC's definition, meaning that the purpose of the meeting is to receive comments from members of the public and other stakeholders. NRC staff will answer process-related questions if time permits. I'd like to note that the NRC is continuing to operate in largely a work-at-home status, and most participants in this meeting are working remotely and individually calling in. There do happen to be a few of us in a large room together with masks to help you experience a better meeting. We recognize that this configuration presents unique challenges and continue to welcome comments about what is and isn't working. Comment on the format and presentation of this meeting may be submitted in the link provided on the web page that originally noticed the meeting. Your input helps provide improvements to NRC future meetings. Slide 3, please. The agenda for our meeting is fairly straightforward. After a brief presentation by the NRC to provide some information about the NRC's environmental justice efforts and feedback it has received to date, the public will be offered an opportunity to provide comments and to ask questions of the NRC staff. This meeting is scheduled to run from 3 to 5 Eastern Time. We will try to allow for as much public input as possible, but we will generally try to adhere to the meeting schedule. Today's call is meant to be an exchange of information, and as always for NRC public meetings, no regulatory decisions will be made. Slide 4, please. This slide provides logistic information on today's meeting. To view the slides, be sure to log into Teams and call into the toll-free line for audio. The audio is only through the bridge line. This arrangement allows for those without broadband access to also participate in the meeting. If you are not on Teams and would like to view the presentation slides, they are in the NRC Adams document database, or you may call NRC's Public Meeting Document Room for assistance at 301-415-4737. The accession number for the passage containing the slides is ML21291A006. The presentation slide ML number is also included in the public meeting announcement. Today's call is an operator-moderated line where participants will have their lines muted until we reach a portion of the meeting where you can provide comments and ask questions of NRC staff. You will be given instructions on how to provide oral comments and ask questions before the public comment portion of this meeting. As indicated in the agenda, we will have allocated a substantial portion of the meeting for this process. However, if participants would like to email questions to our Public Affairs Officer during the staff presentation, please email Mr. David McIntyre at dtm@nrc.gov. Today's call is being recorded and will be transcribed. The transcription will be made available along with the public meeting summary. Given the number of participants we are expecting on the call format, I would ask that as each person speaks, you introduce yourself each time. Additionally, I would ask that speakers limit their use of acronyms. Slide 6, please. slide note speakers for the meeting.
Thank you, Larnice. And good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting on the NRC's review of how it addresses environmental justice in its programs, policies, and activities. If folks have questions as we're going through this presentation, please, if you have access to the chat, you can type your question in the chat. We have a few people monitoring that. And if not, if you can get in touch with the operator, we will work to address your questions as soon as we can. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the meeting today is twofold. First, to provide an overview of the NRC staff's environmental justice review effort. This review was directed by our commission in April of this year. As part of this effort, we've been conducting extensive outreach and have received a lot of great feedback to date. Alan Fetter, our team's project manager, will provide an overview of this feedback later in today's meeting. Second, we're here to receive your comments. As Larnice mentioned, your comments are critical to our review. So on behalf of the team, thank you for engaging with us. We very much appreciate your time and look forward to hearing more today. Next slide, please. To help frame today's discussion, I'd like to start by providing a little more detail about our review effort. In response to direction from our commission, a team was created to conduct a review of how we address environmental justice. Importantly, our work is the first step in the agency's assessment of environmental justice. This team is in essence currently canvassing the landscape, and we will be sharing what we find with our commission in February. Any policy decisions about the NRC's approach to environmental justice would be made by the commission at a later date. So soliciting feedback is an important part of this canvassing and a key component of today's meeting. Though we're in the middle of an active outreach effort, we have already begun assessing the comments received to date to help inform our paper to the commission. And we appreciate that there may be interest that extends beyond the scope of today's meeting. As part of the EJ review, the team is not examining in detail ongoing licensing actions, and such actions will not be discussed today. Particular licensing and regulatory matters will continue to be addressed through NRC's normal processes. So, when we get to the comment portion of the meeting, we would like to focus our discussion on comments related to the environmental justice assessment. For example, how are we doing with environmental justice? Could we do better, and how? So we thank you for your patience and understanding as we try to keep this meeting focused. Next slide, please. A key question to start with is, what is environmental justice? If you've been to our other public meetings, this may sound familiar. For those new to our meetings, welcome, and we hope you find the following information useful. Environmental justice refers to a federal policy established in 1994 by a presidential executive order. This order directed federal agencies to identify and address disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental effects of programs, policies, and activities on minority and low-income populations. As an independent agency, NRC was requested and not directed to comply with this order. And importantly, this order did not create new authority for agencies. So, the NRC looked to see how it fit into existing authorities at the time and determined that it would address environmental justice in its environmental review under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Next slide, please. 10 years later, in 2004, our commission issued a policy statement on environmental justice. Like the 1994 executive order, the policy statement explained the focus of an environmental justice review should be on identifying and weighing disproportionately high and adverse environmental impacts on environmental justice communities. Again, this is currently done through the NRC's NEPA process. Next slide, please. This 2004 policy statement has not been updated since its issuance and is one area the Commission directed we consider. The Commission also directed that we consider recent executive orders, practices of other federal and state agencies and tribal governments, as well as potential formal mechanisms to gather external input. As part of this review, the Commission directed we engage others representing a broad range of perspectives. Next slide, please. Since engagement has been a big focus of our effort to date, I would like to take just a few minutes to talk about our outreach strategy for this assessment. It includes a variety of means to engage with stakeholders and interested persons representing a range of perspectives. First, we identified specific questions to help hone the conversation. These questions were included in the Federal Register notice back in July, and we've shared them through various means, including our public meetings in July and September, hard copy pamphlets that were distributed at in-person meetings in South Carolina over the summer, email listservs, and on our public website. We've also had discussions with a variety of individuals and groups to solicit and better understand their perspectives. This has included, for example, environmental justice community leaders and organizations, environmental and nuclear safety non-governmental organizations, labor unions, and tribal, state, local, and federal government agencies. To help keep folks informed, we recorded a podcast and are working hard to keep our public webpage about this effort up to date. In addition, we've sought to leverage resources within the agency, conducting interviews with staff across the agency, holding a town hall-style meeting, and launching an Idea Scale campaign, which is an internal agency crowdsourcing tool. Our strategy is intended to be flexible, and it has allowed us to learn and adapt as we go. For example, we heard concerns about broadband limitations, so we have been sure to include toll-free numbers for both our public meetings and as a means to provide comments. We've also been partnering with local community leaders to help get the word out about our effort. In addition, we heard our comment period was not long enough, so we extended it twice, and it now closes on October 29th. We also heard from tribal representatives about how to better engage, and hearing that feedback, issued a letter offering tribal nations consultation. So we hear you and are carefully considering your feedback. Thank you so much for engaging with us. Please keep the comments coming. I'll now turn it over to Alan Fetter, our project manager, and he'll walk us through an overview of the feedback we've heard to date, and then we'll open it up for additional comments. Alan?
Yes, thank you very much, Jessica. And Jessica is our Deputy Director of the Environmental Justice Review Team. I understand that the microphone was temporarily muted in case you didn't catch that. So next slide, please. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we've heard so far to help inform the NRC's Environmental Justice Review. This is by no means a complete listing of all we've received on the order of several hundred comments in combination with what's been sent in via the email capture address, and as well as comments we pulled from transcripts and other interactions. So next slide. So we've heard about barriers to meaningful engagement with EJ communities. And Jessica alluded to this earlier, specifically NRC's reliance on IT for notices and public meetings, lack of broadband internet access in many EJ communities, lack of consistent communication from NRC, and communication from NRC is not always easily understandable. Next slide, please. Staff were asked to evaluate recent executive orders and assess whether environmental justice is appropriately considered and addressed given the agency's mission. We've heard that NRC should not limit consideration of executive orders in its EJ review, and that NRC should consider a number of executive orders that have been issued since Executive Order 12898, such as Executive Orders 13985, 13990, and 14008. Next slide, please. One of the other questions we posed to stakeholders and others was to review the adequacy of the 2004 Commission policy statement on environmental justice and which portions were effective. We heard that NRC's approach to the policy statement reflects outdated thinking on justice concepts and should be revised. Specifically, for example, census data tools might not truly reflect social, economic, and racial makeup of communities. Also, this policy statement does not guarantee that the NRC will uphold principles of environmental justice, ensure that all U.S. populations are treated fairly and included in decision-making processes that relate to the environment. The 2004 policy statement does not address tribal engagement, and this should be done early in the licensing process. And NRC should include racial discrimination in its citing and environmental racism in evaluating licensing actions. Next slide, please. And then, what are the ways NRC could enhance identification of environmental justice communities? And how could we enhance opportunities for members of environmental justice communities to participate in licensing and regulatory activities? We've heard that NRC should cultivate relationships with state and local government and non-governmental organizations and other community organizations or community leaders, such as church leaders and church networks or other social networks. NRC should tailor outreach efforts to the specific community, considering the differences and challenges that might exist in each one. NRC should convey technical information in a manner that is clearly understood by all members of the community. And NRC should provide opportunities for early notification and input into both safety and environmental aspects of licensing. Next slide, please. So what actions could NRC take to enhance the consideration of environmental justice at the NRC, considering the agency's mission and statutory authority? We've heard that NRC could create an organization or advisory committee within the NRC with staff solely dedicated to performing outreach and facilitating meaningful engagement with EJ communities. And the NRC should respect sovereign tribal nations by offering consultations early in the decision-making process. Next slide, please. So, as Jessica mentioned earlier, the comment period is ending on October 29th, and this is we're in the last week of getting comments, and so we strongly encourage you to submit your comments if you haven't already done so. Comments are accepted by telephone. You can leave a voicemail. Our preferred method is through the email address shown on this slide. You can also send it by regular mail or through the federal rulemaking website that's listed in the Federal Register. So, and then in February 2020, the staff will provide the results of the review to the Commission. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Larnice.
Thank you, Alan. This brings us to the public comment and question portion of the meeting. Our operator will now tell you how to get into the queue for making comments or asking questions.
Thank you. If you would like to ask a question or have a public comment, please press *1 and record your name when prompted. And if you'd like to withdraw your question, please press *2. One moment to see if you have any questions.
Thank you. Also, in our last meeting, we received feedback about the comment queue process. For this meeting, we will try to periodically provide a list of who is in the queue verbally or in the chat so folks have a sense of when they might be speaking. A few final things before we start taking questions and comments. In an effort to make sure that we hear from as many of you as possible, we ask that participants limit their comments to 3 to 5 minutes. If you go beyond this time, we may need to move on to the next commenter and ask you to re-enter the queue to provide your additional comments as time permits. Keeping the comments within this time frame helps all of us ensure that we are inclusive of others who may want to comment and respectful of others who have taken time to attend this event and wish to speak. Additionally, remember, this is a transcribed and recorded meeting. And while sensitive issues may arise, we ask that comments be provided in a civil and respectful manner. With that, I'd like to turn to Mr. David McIntyre to see if he has received any questions from members of the public via email. Dave?
Hi, Larnice. I have not at this point.
Okay, seeing that he has no questions, I'd like to ask the operator if there's anyone in the phone queue that would like to ask a question.
Yes, our first question or public comment comes from Eric Meyer. Your line is open.
Hi there. Thanks so much for taking this question. My name's Eric. I actually run a pro-nuclear advocacy nonprofit organization, and one of the reasons I decided to start this organization 5 years ago now is because I think nuclear plants are one of the strongest environmental justice technologies we have. It's maybe kind of counterintuitive to say, but when you see the research by Jim Hansen at NASA and Pushkar Korecha at Columbia University, where you realize that because it has nuclear energy has displaced so many fossil fuel plants over the years, it's saved about 2 million lives. So to put it another way, every time a nuclear power plant was built, a coal plant wasn't built there, and a environmental justice community that would have suffered from the impacts of particulate pollution, like heart disease, cancer, asthma, that just wasn't created because nuclear plants don't create any air pollution. I know, just listening to the presentations in the previous month and reading up, there is a really tricky legacy that we have to deal with, going back to uranium mining predominantly for weapons and some of that in the early days of nuclear power. And I just hope that we don't let that history kind of cloud where we are right now in the year 2021, where we need to rapidly decarbonize as fast as possible. And the NRC in striving to keep the public safe maybe loses sight of what will be built instead of nuclear plants if we don't get them approved. And because the public and politicians place a very strong preference in waiting for keeping the lights on, rightfully so, we're seeing more and more gas plants built, and we can see the foils of doing that in Texas and in Europe right now. So I hope the NRC is able to look holistically at this question of environmental justice in terms of air pollution and climate change, and realize that nuclear energy is a way to kind of bring environmental justice into the future and create opportunities for the future. I mean, you build a nuclear plant, you got clean energy for 80 plus years, and I think that's just worth keeping in mind because the NRC has such an important job to do. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak and look forward to hearing other people.
Thank you, Eric. Next question, please.
Our next question or public comment comes from Elaine Cooper. Your line is open.
Yes. I'm calling in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm calling in from Columbia, South Carolina. I'm South Carolina Sierra Club member, 350 Columbia, and Richland County Black Collective. That last phone call, last response, I felt so saddened about, because that person obviously was not associated or living in EJ communities such as we are. In Lower Richland, we have Westinghouse, a facility that produces nuclear rods for nuclear facilities. The folks down there are desperate for jobs, and so they take their jobs to feed their children, etc. As I sat around the table with these folks, they say, yeah, this is an incredibly dangerous facility. We have to take it to eat, to to put food on our table. But yeah, we have to take showers after, and cousin so-and-so has cancer, and this person over here worked 30 years. They have the same form of cancer, and that person over there has the same form of cancer, and everyone knows everyone who has the same form of cancer and who is incredibly sick. We know that this is from years and years of working at this facility, and we are deeply, deeply so sad that we have to give up our health to supply in order to afford a job, to put some food on the table. So nuclear power facilities, and like this in Westinghouse and others, prey upon desperate, low-income communities of color who have no other choice, none whatsoever, no other corporations, no other business in order to get a job. Shame on them. These aging facilities have to be closed down, and now they're seeking 40-year renewal license for facilities that are at least 50 years old and have huge safety violations. I was even told recently that there's safety violations that these folks know about all the time that the public are not aware of, and there are no evacuation plans that the community knows of, no way to even get to the community in case there is a far more dangerous, which almost happened at this facility. There's no way to greenwash your way around nuclear power facilities. So as people continue to be aware of this and empowered, we're all moving towards solar. Yes, we do have other means to develop, such as solar and more actual renewables, without having to prey upon low-income Black communities. Thanks, I guess. Now, also, I want to say that I was not able to hardly hear the audio. I could see the slides, got on the phone call. I have my audio up all the way. I could barely hear the presentation. So perhaps you'll have to repeat this presentation or send us some recording of the audio along with the presentation. But it was barely audible. And I just want you to let you know that I'm available to teach you all to use Zoom. Thanks.
Your comments are noted, Elaine. Thank you very much. The meeting is being recorded and transcribed also, just for you to know. Thank you very much. Next commenter, please.
Our next comment comes from Mana Jo Green. Your line is open.
Thank you very much. I agree with the previous caller who has firsthand experience. I also want to say that we have firsthand experience around Indian Point, but the biggest environmental justice issue, in addition to all the outreach and effective input that you're seeking ways to improve, but, and I commend that, but I think there's a bigger issue, and that issue is that we should not be bringing nuclear waste from around the country to so-called interim consolidated storage because it's not likely to be interim if we don't have a national repository or repositories already cited and agreed upon. And so you're going to be transporting very high-level nuclear waste across the country, and, in spite of the infrastructure bill, there's no emphasis on hardening those routes and improving those routes through environmental justice communities to communities in the two states of New Mexico and Texas, and those environmental justice communities have been exposed since the Trinity atomic testing, and then through years of uranium mining and milling and processing and transportation, and now potentially storing so much of the nation's nuclear waste. Instead, the real environmental justice solution is to store it as safely as possible on site, or if it's in very dangerous areas like San Onofre, to be moved to a site as close as possible that is safer than the Pacific floodplain. So I think there's a bigger issue at stake. It's very commendable that you are doing outreach and asking how to do better outreach to environmental justice communities. And I just want to close by saying that nuclear power is absolutely not a climate solution. We have good, safe climate solutions at hand: wind, water, solar, storage to make it reliable, et cetera. But nuclear power means to continuously generate nuclear waste for which there are no good solutions. There is no truly safe disposal. We can make it as safe as possible at each of the sites until there are national repositories. But Hudson River Swoop Clearwater strongly believes that we should be investing in renewables and stop making highly dangerous, high-level nuclear waste. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Next caller, please.
Our next caller comes from Leon Woodbury. Your line is open.
Okay. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask some questions and perhaps make some recommendations or addendums to the recommendations that I heard. So the wording is in there about whatever advisory body, whatever it's called, if the commissioners agree in February to establish that. I think the word meaningful engagement needs a little more definition. So, and in the EJ movement, we define meaningful engagement as involvement in planning, decision-making, allocation of resources, implementation, and evaluation. Excuse me. I think that's very important because we want to make sure that whatever body is created is in line with, the principles and the policies and procedures that EJ organizations over decades set in place. And so that's one, and I'm asking that there can be an expansion on those words, meaningful engagement. Also, in terms of how the body will be assembled, a recommendation to the commissioners is that we get a group of EJ organizers, leaders together, and some that have a history, that actually are involved, and that they help with with creating whatever the advisory body will be. And then the third thing is we definitely need some sort of definition in terms of what organizations, what individuals should be on this advisory body. And we have a lot of folks who say they do environmental justice work, from for-profit corporations, the foundations, big green organizations, et cetera, in order to actually and accurately have the voice of the community be heard, then we need to come up with that stakeholder group that helps put it together. We need to make sure that that the authentic voice of the community is being heard, maybe by saying that in order to be a member of the advisory board, you have to be involved in EJ work for a minimum amount of time, that your organization leadership has to be a member of an EJ community, your organization should be headquartered in an EJ community, and that sort of thing. So we know that we're getting authentic voices from the community and not folks who have just added that onto their programmatic work. So I think that's very important. And I know that might be a lot, but I was just thinking that if those additions, those changes could be added to the recommendation, it would be really helpful towards us putting together a body that can actually have some impact and input into the decision making and actions that NRC takes. And by doing this, we can be proactive and maybe avoid many of the incidents and many of the complaints and cries for change that we hear from EJ communities when it comes to nuclear incidents and industry. If we put this together right, then we can bring together the EJ community, hear its authentic voice, hear its needs, and perhaps be able to take proactive action so that we can have healthier communities and avoid some of the adversarial relationships that have developed over the decades. So thank you very much for that, and I hope that is helpful, and we probably will be submitting some more comments regarding this report recommending the possible establishment of Environmental Justice Advisory Group at NCR. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments and your recommendations, Mr. Woodbury. Next caller, please.
Our next caller is Kelly Muktia. Your line is open.
Hi, everyone. I am Kelly Muktia. I've earned my master's and my bachelor's in nuclear engineering from the University of Illinois, and I currently work as the outreach chair for Generation Atomic. And I am so glad to have everyone here concerned about nuclear energy. And I think I've heard a lot of concern about nuclear waste, but I'm here to, dispel any myths. Just like the way you guys are concerned, many nuclear engineers are even more concerned, and they've designed so many systems in order to keep the radiation in, to keep it completely secure. And as a matter of fact, nuclear waste isn't really even waste. It is simply just nuclear spent fuel that our future advanced reactors are going to be able to utilize as a as a fuel source. So as my recommendation for the NRC would be to, continue to invest in outreach programs in order to dispel these myths about nuclear, because it's completely understandable to be afraid of something you don't know. So that's why it's important for the NRC to continue to invest money and resources into educating communities that are around nuclear power plants and just overall. Yeah. So thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Lucia. Do we have any other callers?
Our next question or comment comes from Pamela Greenlaw. Your line is open.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I'm in the South, so I'm going to say Ms. Kelly. I'm sorry that Ms. Kelly has not done her historical study on the damages of nuclear spent fuel, and not just spent fuel, but the other issues with it, as was pointed out by a former caller, including the uranium mining and processing. So she needs to go back and look at the broad scale of it. I believe that we've had several Native Americans from New Mexico who educated us in past calls, and I would hope that Ms. Kelly would go back and look at that. I have asked if you would return to the slides, and you're trying to do that, but what you have there, I can't remember the slide number, but Reverend Woodbury, Leo Woodbury, who just spoke with you, was talking very eloquently and accurately about a need for definitions. And yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. This is really important for us to look at that. If you could scroll to the next one, and I'm sorry I didn't take notes, so I'm going to try not to take there we go, here we go. Okay, as far as these definitions, Reverend Leo was exactly right that if you get a group of stakeholders without having qualifications, you're going to end up, I think, with not a broad base from which to work. So I'm just here to say absolutely look at everything that he suggested and incorporate that. My concern, the reason I'm calling specifically is, and I know you didn't want to go into some specifics, but we really have to. Nuclear energy is not totally separate from the nuclear military uses, and let me explain. The Westinghouse fuel fabrication plant in Hopkins, South Carolina, that Ms. Cooper was referring to, also has on the campus Westdyne, also known as Westinghouse Government Services, has been fabricating TP bars in which the lithium aluminate, or I'm sorry, my pronunciation is not right, but those bars are put together. They're sent to a nuclear commercial site, TVA, Watts Bar, to be irradiated to create tritium. So we actually have some waste streams that people think are separate from, that they're not from the same source, but they are. What happened between 2004 and 2010, and this is in the GAO report, the TP bars were leaking tritium so badly into the nuclear facility, and this persisted even after redesign. I hope Ms. Kelly will go back and maybe she can research, find out if they have solved that problem. The GAO doesn't usually get involved unless someone from Congress asks them to make a specific inspection or a specific audit. But these are not myths that nuclear energy production and the mining and storing the spent fuel, that it is dangerous. These are not myths. These are actualities, and we know that this is a problem because the waste processing and storage area in New Mexico is running out of space as we speak. And I'm not going to go on much longer here. We're talking about energy production, and the other fuel that Duke Energy used to talk about a lot is energy efficiency. We have to think about, and I know that you cannot do this, I know NRC does not have the authority or power to do this, but everyone on this call needs to think about how we are using this energy. If we're using it for base load, that's one thing. If we're using it to power only cities and not industries that run overnight, we're really, well, I'm doing a Sarah Palin, kind of stopping one sentence and starting another. Stores and businesses, new development, the energy efficiency standards are rarely high enough to reduce the amount of energy that we need to run them. So I just wanted to pitch that. It's not something that you all can do. But if you will scroll one more time, this thing about that what you've heard, would you scroll to the next slide? Thank you. Okay. I think you need to tighten up the definitions on that second bullet. NRC should tailor outreach efforts to the specific community, considering the differences and challenges that might exist. They do exist. I think you should say that exist, take the might out, okay, because you're going to have to drill down and in your advisory committee work on actually looking at what these challenges are. Also, that last one, that you should provide opportunities for, and I can't read the rest of it, it's obscured by someone's raised hand on my screen. Well, anyway.
That's on your screen.
Yeah, so actually, while you brought that up, if anyone has their hand raised, we won't be able to call on anyone with their hand raised. Please lower your hands, and if you want to speak, press *1 or type a question in the chat. The raised hands we can't really address. So that's
well, that's good to know. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I think, and I'll just put these in written comments, how to tighten this up. I know you're trying to write it generally as a template or as a way for you to start working on these things, but I think you should tighten some of them up from the beginning, and I'm going to stop. Other people have questions and comments. Thank you.
And appreciate your time. And so the bullets on the screen, that was our effort to summarize the feedback we've heard to date. So the specific information you just provided is fantastic. And if there's other specifics, you're talking about drilling down, that specific kind of information, if you want to provide that in written comments, or if others on the line have those, that's fantastic information for us to consider. So thank you so much for raising that, and appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
I believe we have about 3 people in the queue, so please feel free to call in. We have time for more. Can you please, operator, put the next person through, please?
Absolutely. Our next question or comment comes from Diane Dorigo. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Diane Dorigo. I'm with Nuclear Information and Resource Service. I believe that the NRC needs to improve its environmental justice policy, but it also needs to take a look at what its environmental justice history has been and to focus on possibilities for helping to correct previous violations. Those previous violations continue. Far from what the first speaker said about it being tricky, it's way more than tricky. We're talking about pretty much most, if not all, of the thousands, 10, 15,000 or more uranium mines that are still open and contaminating the communities in which they were located throughout mostly the West, but other parts of the country as well, and need to be dealt with. The Church Rock spill from 1979, the dam break has never been cleaned up, has never been followed up on, and those are clear violations of environmental justice that are part of the nuclear fuel chain that has been, and it's not like it's gone forever, and it's a long ago history. I'm from around the West Valley Nuclear Reprocessing Site. Another speaker talked about reusing the portions of the irradiated fuel. And the reality is that we have a potentially $10 billion cleanup project on the only commercial reprocessing in the country. that only operated for 6 years. So before we can ever do any future, quote, recycling, it's actually reprocessing of irradiated or spent fuel. And the communities that are most affected are directly downwind and downstream. It's the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation of Indians, and they were never notified. And they're calling for the full cleanup of that site. So that needs to be done long before we're going to make new messes or do new reprocessing. The NRC only looks, the federal agencies, when they look at radiation, the radiation standards in this country only look at cancer health effects and, in some cases, birth defects in the next 2 generations. They ignore all of the other many impacts of radiation. So already the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the other federal agencies are it's violating environmental justice by exposing people of color and poor communities to radiation, but it's also unjust overall. Women are 50% more likely to get cancer than men, according to the latest National Academy of Sciences report on radiation. Children, little girls especially, 7 times more likely, according to their charts, and yet the radiation standards don't protect. So indigenous communities that are closer to the land, that use the water and the environment more are present in it more closely, are going to get much more exposure. There's no consideration in radiation protection for cumulative effects of radiation and other stressors in the environment. They don't have to be carcinogens necessarily, but certainly there are cumulative, multiple synergistic effects from radioactivity and chemicals and other stressors in the environment, and that's never considered. People in low-income communities and low economic brackets have been shown to be subject to greater stress in many cases, that being a stressor. Not always, but that needs to be factored in. The NRC, under its current EJ policy, does not consider environmental justice in doing environmental assessments, in generic environmental impact statements, and in many other situations where it should. So the policy needs to be expanded to always consider environmental justice, to presume that people in environmental justice communities have standing for interventions and for the ability to make contentions, and that the NRC should reassess its allowable standards to include the greater risks to women, children, the elderly, and communities that have multiple additional other stressors. So the NRC, I believe, should assist environmental justice interveners in interventions, that there should be funding for independent review of policies, rules, regulations, changes, and for technical and legal support for environmental justice communities. This is a problem with all public interest interventions or all interveners, that they're completely outnumbered by the NRC and the applicant for various nuclear licenses and amendments. What the NRC can do is, I support the previous caller's suggestion of having an environmental justice advisory group, but yes, I do support that. I think that's a great idea. And I would... Diane? One more sentence. And so I would also add, though, that institutionally within the NRC, there needs to be a division to assist interveners and to also review and change the regulations in Part 2 for intervention to assume that EJ is a acceptable criteria for standing and for contentions.
Thank you very much, Diane. We appreciate your perspective.
You're welcome.
Can we have another commenter, please?
Yes, our next question or comment comes from Madison Schroeder. Your line is open.
All right, hello, my name is Madison Schroeder. I want to make sure that I'm refocusing my comment towards the purpose of this meeting, which is the NRC's relationship with environmental justice. I was able to listen in last hearing at the beginning of October, and it is evident that there is apprehension and fear around nuclear energy. I want to acknowledge this fear as it is valid. However, I think it's also important that we acknowledge that there is a gap in credible information being discussed about nuclear energy, and the solution for this is my recommendation to the NRC as it pertains to environmental justice. The participants here go back and forth on what's right and what is wrong, but there is little intervention from the NRC to sort some of this out. Environmental justice is both a retroactive and proactive effort, not just addressing past failures to these communities, which are valid, but to provide opportunities for the future. These discussions have really focused on the retroactive aspects of environmental justice, but I want to discuss what the NRC can do as a part of its proactive effort towards environmental justice. Therefore, I believe that the NRC's environmental justice efforts should be contingent on fostering a comprehensive understanding of the effects and basics of nuclear energy as they are understood by experts. If the NRC is to take a well-rounded approach to environmental justice, I believe that it has a responsibility to provide up-to-date knowledge about the issues that are being discussed here. This includes the safety of nuclear energy plants and waste storage, the economic benefits for communities in the form of jobs and taxes, and its contribution towards addressing climate change. Misinformation is dangerous, but here it is especially threatening when it is pinned up against the real threats from fossil fuels. Therefore, I specifically recommend that the NRC put together up-to-date, expert-driven information about nuclear energy that is made available on their website for the public to access. These should include peer-reviewed scholarly research and current data. I believe that one of the strongest weapons we have for environmental justice is education, and this requires addressing sources of misinformation and encouraging fact-based discussions about nuclear energy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madison. Do we have any other callers?
Our next question or comment comes from Seaver Wang. The line is open.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much to the NRC for convening this public meeting. I'm Seaver Wang. In my comments regarding environmental justice, I want to emphasize that no energy is without risk. Fundamentally, the production of electricity requires transformation of vast quantities of energy, and I commend the NRC for its efforts to ensure that the industry follows good practices and manages risks. At the same time, we should keep in mind that nuclear is statistically an extremely safe source of energy, and that new nuclear technologies. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can be heard.
Okay, and new nuclear technologies have the potential to be many orders of magnitude safer still. I'll point out that I am a young caller. I'm only 29 years old, so in contrast to some of the other callers, I will have to actually live with the consequences of climate change. I also hold a PhD in climate and earth science, and so I am far more concerned about the environmental and climate risks that under current trends will be a guaranteed and real threat to me than I am about the near zero, highly unlikely risks associated with nuclear power. I am at many, many, many more times more risk of being harmed driving to the grocery store than I am from nuclear power. So I would like to call out environmental groups like the Sierra Club and Union of Concerned Scientists for stoking non-scientific fears, especially among poor and minority communities, as part of its ideological anti-nuclear campaign. I think this is actually an environmental injustice that exploits historical trauma in EJ groups and inflicts unneeded mental harm. I agree with an earlier comment by Eric Meyer that the NRC should adopt a holistic approach and consider the potential for projects under that apply to the NRC to avoid disproportional environmental harms that would impact poor and minority communities if alternative fossil technologies were built in their place. I also agree with Eric that we should acknowledge historical environmental injustices associated with uranium mining and waste storage, and that the NRC should look to such historical incidents to inform how it evaluates license applications. So I'm going to close by also echoing sort of Madison and encouraging the NRC to continue to use sort of scientific, objective standards for evaluating risks that could be in the process of its activities and processes, and again, as I mentioned earlier, to also evaluate avoided risks. So as a result, benefits that could be brought about by projects under its purview. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Just to let everyone know, we have almost 10 people in the queue waiting, so please be mindful of your comments and your time. Operator, next caller, please.
Our next question or comment comes from Michelle Lee. Your line is open.
Thank you. I would just add in one procedural thing. For people who've come on to this later, they may not have heard that the way to get into the queue is through pushing *1. So I would request that when you're doing these meetings, you periodically identify how people can present input. So that being said, I'm going to focus very narrowly on some of the procedural aspects and problems that I've seen rather than the substantive issues, which I'll address in written comments. Procedurally, much of the resource and references that the NRC uses in its environmental justice and environmental impact statements are your own regulations, which is absolutely circular reasoning. You assume that something will not happen, there will not be a problem because you have a regulation. And that is really something that would get you a D grade if you were doing it in a college paper. So that's number one. Number two, I really urge you to get input from lay people on how to improve ADAMS and access to documents on your web pages. They're really, I've been working in this industry for decades now, and I go nuts. For somebody who doesn't have facility or able to have experts help them get into it, it's a nightmare, and I think you'll find that to be a very widespread problem. It certainly is an impediment to people in the EJ communities from participation. Along those lines, I really urge you not to continually use marketing terms that are advanced by the industry. Words like clean are not scientific words. Zero carbon is actually scientifically false at pretty much every single level of the full fuel cycle, including the fission process, which generates carbon-14, which the level of which the NRC does not assess. It is really unconscionable to be using language that is essentially PR, that is being promoted by the industry. And the final thing I would say is I certainly support this task force, but it really needs to include experts from outside of the NRC. I certainly think the NRC staff are among the most proficient and skilled physicists and engineers and so forth that we have, but you do not have people who have background in other disciplines, and oh my God, your analyses really reek of that. I'll just end with one example, is your environmental impact, a draft environmental impact statement for the Holtec, New Mexico CISF, doesn't address issues with water. If there's one issue in New Mexico that is imminently a crisis, you would think that would be it. Heat, water, drought, and your citations in the document go back to textbooks from decades ago. But that is partly, I think, the result of the fact that you don't have people on your staff, and that's why you need to get solicit people outside the NRC and outside the nuclear industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Can we have the next commenter, please?
Yes, our next question or comment comes from Ed Myman. The line is open.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I spoke on the panel discussion a couple of weeks ago, so I wasn't going to say anything, but I did hear my organization, the Union of Concerned Scientists, name invoked in vain. So in our defense, the four, if I counted right, speakers representing Generation Atomic, which is an industry-funded greenwashing group, their comments not only are extremely patronizing by maintaining that somehow they have the received truth about the safety of nuclear power, and that it's simply a matter of ignorance on the part of everyone else because they don't understand how safe it is. Let me just say it clearly. They are appallingly ignorant in their approach. There are things that they say which are not supported by science, and so that certainly is not the way to environmental justice. I fully agree that you need to base all understanding and decision-making on the best available evidence, informed by policy and individual perspectives, science is fundamental to that. But to spout nonsense about how advanced reactors are going to eat up all the spent fuel in the world, as Diane Dorigo pointed out, is an absurdity. And I would argue that if the Generation Atomic folks want to be taken more seriously in this process, they need to think a little bit harder about the materials that they are putting out, and need to acknowledge that there are technical and health-related issues associated with the generation and release of ionizing radiation that need to be fully accounted for. And superficial and apples to oranges comparisons with fossil fuels, which are not, of course, within the NRC's main regulatory responsibility of regulating radiological health and safety, but putting that aside, these comparisons based on papers written by Jim Hansen and others are fundamentally flawed in a lot of ways, and it would suit everyone to try to understand a little bit better the relative issues, not only the technical and health-related issues associated with different energy sources, but also how our society distributes and those energy sources and who benefits and who suffers in each case. So I think we all need to think a little bit harder about when we raise the mantle of who has the best scientific and technical evidence, that we all need to be a little humbler about it and try to understand better where the uncertainties are, because we're not going to come to a good understanding of how to promote environmental justice unless we're basing things on the best available information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyman, for your comments. I'd like to emphasize, while just taking a moment, that while it was only fair for you to respond to some of the previous commenters, please keep your comments on task, what you have to say to the NRC. That's for all of the callers. And let's remember to be civil and respectful so that we can get everyone's opinions, and remember that they are just that, opinions, and we're considering them all as we move forward. So thank you very much to everyone who has commented thus far, and let's move on with the comments.
Our next question or comment comes from Catherine Skopik. The line is open.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Skopik.
Thank you very much. I am presently chair of Sierra Club New York City Group, and for several years was chair of Shutdown Indian Point Now, the nuclear power plant on the Hudson River in New York. This is in regard to environmental justice, true?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. First thing, give back the land. If we're talking about true environmental justice, we have to start prior to colonialism. Secondly, I understand that the downwinders received remuneration, however, the indigenous did not. This is shocking to me. I don't know if it's true. From everything I've researched, it is. But I think these downwinders, their remaining relatives, need to receive remuneration. Secondly, the White Mesa uranium mill is causing a lot of problems. I'll just cite two or three of them. One, the holding pit for water is supposed to have a protective fence around it. It's a very low fence. The wild animals jump that fence and drink the water. As someone else mentioned, water is an issue in New Mexico, and sometimes there is drought. So animals are drinking this water. The company has not protected against that from happening. When trucks are hauling away some of the contaminated earth, flaps have been seen to be open and dust is blowing out, where children play, where elders walk, and where sheep graze. So there has been a completely sloppy, irresponsible handling of the operating uranium mill, the White Mesa. And I would also like to mention the CIS, Consolidated Interim Storage, which several people have mentioned already. But I find it something in my brain I can't comprehend. If you're really interested in environmental justice, why you would put these in communities, BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. In my mind, there's a big disconnect. Maybe you're doing this now because you hadn't looked at it in the future. But these are people who are struggling. These are people that are at the lower end of the economic and financial and social and everything else, if there is such a spectrum, and they are the people least able to deal with the harms that come from leaking uranium fuel and all of the other problems that these consolidated interim storage facilities in New Mexico and Texas can deal with. They are least prepared to be able to deal with the impact of the dangers of these, to say nothing of the fact that this nuclear spent fuel would be shipped from around the country, from what do we have, about 90 aging nuclear power plants at the moment, most of them aging, getting ready to begin decommissioning. Where is all that spent fuel going to be going, rather than keeping it on site in storage casks, shipped to these CISF? And we've all heard, just look in your mind, that going back, how many accidents you've heard of train derailments, trucks having an accident and spilling their, whatever their cargo is. So to ship nuclear waste all around the country is compounding the problem. So the people where these CISF are now located are the people who have not received any of the benefits, if one could say they are benefits, of energy from this dangerous faulty material. And the last thing that I would like to say is that I like the idea of having a special committee for outreach or to deal with this issue. What I would like to suggest is that you create a formula that is tied to the profits of the nuclear industry going back to when it began. And whatever that formula is, 50% per year of the profits going to those who have been negatively impacted, the Navajo, the Dene, the Ute, all of the Seneca, all of the tribal nations whose lands have been absolutely ruined by nuclear waste. Take this formula, make it fair, have everyone sitting around a table, all the stakeholders, representatives of all the tribes who have had to mine and live with the millings and tillings and the church rock spill and so forth, sitting around a table, come up with a formula that is realistic and fair based on the profits of the nuclear industry and have distribution going to these tribes henceforth forever or as long as is possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just for everyone's information, we still have about 5 or 6 people in the queue, so we're going to keep moving right along. Operator, can we have the next commenter, please?
Absolutely. Our next question or comment comes from Key Michelle Meacham. The line is open.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I tried to put as much as I could into the chat because this conversation is going in all sorts of different directions and trying to take notes at the same time. I'm also in a second meeting concurrently, so I'm listening to 2 meetings at once. So just to reiterate and make sure this is on record, I asked earlier, in what ways is the NRC proposing to develop better operating procedures and communication means to develop relationships with tribes? Is the NRC making its safety review process available to the public? And in respect to that, does the safety review process include protective measures as that might forces and Native American artifacts? Is the safety review process available to the public? Will the NRC work with the tribes directly as it relates to the safety review process, plan and process? I also had shared that in case I did not get to speak, I reiterated those questions. I agree that an advisory committee should be created, and I recommended that the NRC develop an anti-environmental racism policy. I keep hearing race and ethnicity and discrimination being raised. I'm not saying that that is not the case, but these are not soundbite items to continue to throw up in everybody's face. I think that is a stone block wall creator, and it breaks down communication. And with that in mind, the issue of BIPOC communities, my question on that is going back to the safety review process that the NRC might exercise and have in place that may or may not be available to the public. In that safety plan, are there any suggestions or measures in place for these community residents where there might be a breach, or has been in the past, of course, there might be a future breach where there are better communication processes to get information out, or is that placed on the facility? Is that the responsibility of the facility? If it is not on the backs of the facilities to communicate that information, does the NRC have a process to get immediate information on the streets and into these communities? I want to thank y'all for letting me speak. I will let you have the very interesting floor back. Thank you.
Thank you. We missed, I think, a little bit of what you said first, but based on your later comments that you put them in the chat, I think we've captured everything. And we will definitely be considering your questions as we will other comments.
And some information in response to one of your questions, Chief Mitchum. You asked about, will the information that we're working on be made publicly available? So our plan is to make as much of our report publicly available as we can shortly after it's provided to the Commission. So that will be out there. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, we can move on to the next commenter, please.
Our next question or comment comes from Barbara Warren. The line is open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Ms. Warren.
Oh, great, thank you. I live in New York, and we're very concerned about the environmental justice issue. First of all, I want to bring up the issue of nuclear waste because it's inherent in anything nuclear. And a couple of years ago, GAO identified environmental liabilities as high risk for the nation. It was the first time that this was done, that they identified it as high risk for the nation. And what they're talking about largely is nuclear waste. We have more and more nuclear waste dumps, just waste sites that have not been cleaned up, whether it be mining, manufacturing, just not handling the waste that exists and that is just piled up. And what that means is that it is an environmental justice today, but environmental justice for thousands of years into the future because of the long-lived nature of radionuclides. And so this must be part of your review of what this is all about, because right now, when GAO identified it as high risk for the nation, we are spending 1/8 the amount every year of what is needed to clean up these various sites around the country. 1/8. So that means we're never going to catch up. It's only getting worse. In fact, if you look back a few years, you'll see that number has changed, and it only is changing in the wrong direction. And what that leads to is intergenerational injustice as well, because it means that the children and the grandchildren and the next generations ahead of us will be contaminating the water, the air, the land around everywhere where people are living. So this is a very dangerous proposition unless NRC gets a hold of this and really addresses it. I'll probably be submitting written comments, but that's all I have to say today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to take a minute to remind people that if they would rather send their questions via email, they may send their questions to Dave McIntyre at dtm@nrc.gov. He is available to send the questions to us here, or if they have a comment that they would like to be read. With that, we'll move on to the next comment, please.
Our next question or comment comes from Leon Woodbury. The line is open.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to address the issue about what science NRC should be considering, and specifically as this event is around environmental justice. I want to say that that is a decision that should be made by the Environmental Justice Advisory Group members, as it should be made with environmental justice organizations and with the community. There's a history of industry science being one of the main reasons why there is conflict and dissent and disagreement around all environmental issues. And so I think people in communities and EJ leaders, et cetera, that we should be able to respect their ability to look at all kinds of science that comes from all different places. So whether it's industry science, citizen science, academic science that comes from academic institutions that's been peer reviewed, the Union of Concerned Scientists, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, whatever, that in order for us to make good decisions, we have to look at both the diversity of the science, and then have to look at what kind of impacts that science is having on our communities, or what benefits may come from us aligning ourselves with certain types of science. So I think it would be a grave mistake, not only in terms of putting together an environmental justice advisory group, but I think it's a great mistake for NRC to limit the science that they look at from only one perspective, and instead they should be as inclusive and diverse as possible, just as we, strive to be in the environmental justice movement. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next commenter, please.
Our next question or comment comes from Jesse Deerenwater. The line is open.
Let's see here. I think I'm unmuted, right?
We can hear you.
All right. Greetings all. Jesse Deerenwater, Citizens Resistance at Fermi 2 in North Redford, citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, here in Michigan. I wanted to really just comment on the final policy statement. Personally, I feel like it's crap. I mean, I won't speak on behalf of my organization, but I will give you some other comments. The executive order needs to create new and or substantive rights and requirements or rights. That should be the purpose of it. It's literally dealing with people's lives, the Earth's health. It should grant rights of protection to people, beings, and land if determined. If determined, it also need be applied to any party or finding that points towards environmental justice, communities, and issues. The Commission needs to recognize EJ as more than a tool and recognize it as a foundational premise of any just society, as well as a deciding factor of the future and acknowledgement of past harms of impacted peoples, communities, lands, waters, around environmental justice issues and nuclear regulatory policy and future. EJ also need to be a litigable issue and tool in NRC providings and adequately investigate and evaluate the proceedings and everything based on the principles put forth by EJ communities, and follow, honor, and uphold the work that EJ communities have put forth in providing these principles. You guys mentioned that racial motivation is not cognizable under NEPA. In that case, maybe there needs to be some more language around that. Maybe the NRC need not depend on NEPA and their rules and regulations as far as environmental justice goes. Maybe or maybe not, but one of the important things is that with all the money and power and sway that the nuclear industry has, whether civilian or military, you guys should have the capacity, resources, and know-how to sit down and work with some environmental justice communities and figure some shit out, whether it be language around racial motivation, whether it be language around environmental justice, whether it be language around how new rights or requirements are created through environmental justice in relation to nuclear. I would like to say that environmental assessments need to include environmental justice analysis. I believe someone else already said that. Generic and programming impact statements, they also need to include environmental justice analysis. And these environmental justice analysis would be those same ones I mentioned earlier whenever it comes to EJ being a litigable issue and evaluate and investigate and all the different things, the principles put forth by EJ communities. And that could look like anything like the a sect of the Environmental Justice Advisory Council that I'd heard a couple people mentioned. There need be funding in there for these community organizations who are intervening on their own because their whole freaking part of the state is in the utilities pocket, right? So there need be there just need be some way for the environmental justice communities and or people to be able to take a swing at these things. That's I believe that's all that I have now. I mean, I could go into tons of examples how the NRC has failed with specific examples of environmental justice in communities and people. I could also go into demands, more demands, but yeah, those are my basics. You know, the executive order needs to create new and substantive requirements and rights for people's beings and land when determined to be a part of an environmental justice community or issue. The Commission need recognize EJ as more than a tool and recognize it as a foundational premise of a just society. And EJ need to be a litigable issue in courts, NRC's proceedings, because, those are the things around that.
Mr. Dearwater.
Yeah,
Thank you for your comment.
and the environmental assessments, generic and programmatic impact statements need include environmental justice analysis. That's all.
Great.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Just a reminder, we have about a half an hour left. So if you have something that you want to email or you want to get in the queue, please do so. Also, remember this meeting is being transcribed and will be published, and so we want to not have any redacted language, so let's please watch our language as we are giving our opinions and our comments. So with that, let us move on to the next caller.
Our next question or comment comes from Jackie Toth. The line is open.
Thank you.
Hey there, this is Jackie Toth with the Good Energy Collective, and I just wanted to take a moment to say that, you know, we really appreciate the NRC's commitment to getting this right and addressing environmental justice more holistically and effectively than the existing 2004 policy statement definitely allows. Ultimately, you know, from our perspective, addressing historic and present environmental injustices, it's going to take an all-of-government approach with each of the agencies that are involved in nuclear issues and nuclear cleanups, including the Energy Department, Environmental Protection Agency, and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to work together and to do so collectively to work on achieving restorative justice for communities who have borne the brunt of impacts from the nuclear fuel cycle. Yet we support the development of an internal EJ advisory group to weigh in at the NRC through the NEPA process and agree strongly with Reverend Woodbury that this group should consist of EJ leaders specifically working on justice issues in their communities. You know, the people convened, as he suggested, you know, they should have demonstrated work and commitment to environmental and social justice. But with the clear commitment we've seen from NRC and the Biden administration at large to do better in this area, you know, Good Energy Collective, where I'm at, you know, we believe that together we can get this right and ultimately leverage nuclear energy in an appropriate way to contribute toward emissions reductions and start meaningfully addressing climate change. So I'm very thankful to NRC for undertaking this effort and holding this meeting today, and we look forward to communicating with the NRC throughout this process. Thanks.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Next caller, please.
Our next question or comment comes from Kayleen Walker. Your line is open.
Hi there. I guess the way I see it, if the NRC were actually doing its job of regulating for safety, then this wouldn't even have to be a discussion. And when the consequences of poor regulatory process start impacting the wealthy white communities and the regular New York City or anywhere else that there might be impact from poorly contained nuclear waste, for example, in the canisters that the NRC has allowed, then the pushback is going to be even more extreme. So the environmental justice issue, I think, really comes down to the NRC doing their job. I've been kind of following the process over the last 5 years, kind of attending a lot of meetings, and what I've noticed is that the NEI has both boots in the door and are basically running the show on so many levels. the 72.48 process of exempting regulations. If the NRC required Title 10 to be followed, we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we have. Yet, and then the NRC right now is so blatantly promoting the new nuclear. As for the gentleman, the 29-year-old gentleman who was feeling so confident about the nuclear energy, I've been becoming aware of a lot of impacted communities. And I'll just point out Piketon, for example, where the DOE radiation monitors registered neptunium and americium, and they shut down a junior high school 2 years ago. And lately, children who had been in that school are dying with leukemia now, as we speak. Meanwhile, the NRC has approved the HALU, the enrichment facility at Piketon with only an environmental assessment. So the categorical exclusions of NEPA that the NRC has been pushing for are just, they're brazen violations of what should be a very inherent code of conduct within the NRC. And so unless the individual staff members use their conscience and moral code, this is hopeless. You can do whatever you want as far as having some kind of committee for environmental justice. But right now, the NRC is seriously flawed, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for your opinion, Ms. Walker. Let's take the next caller, please.
Our next question or comment comes from Kelly Muktia. Your line is open.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kelly, again, from Generation Atomic. And I really love everyone's concerns, for these communities that are impacted. But, what happens more frequently are communities that are being impacted by the effects of fossil fuels. There are far more communities of those facing those consequences. And so the only way that we're going to be able to decrease, these low-income POC communities being impacted by the effects of climate change and, emissions is by supporting nuclear power plants. Because even though, renewables are great, they simply do not produce enough base load energy to sustain our needs. Right now, I'm calling in from good old Windy City, aka Chicago. But guess what? The wind is not blowing, and the sun is for sure not shining. So, guess what? The communities that are impacted by fossil fuels are going to continue to suffer until we transition completely or majority to nuclear energy, and that way we can eliminate our carbon emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
Our next question or comment comes from Alyssa Hayes. Your line is open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you first and foremost to the NRC staffers who have enabled this important conversation. I want to give a little bit of background about myself because I think a few others have done similarly. I'm a bisexual woman of color. My mom immigrated to the United States from the Philippines when she was 9, so I'm the first person in my mom's family to be born in the United States. Both my parents have a high school education, so I'm also the first person in my family to attend college. My mom, worked at a Walmart to support 5 kids, and I grew up in a community of color, but thanks to the FAFSA multiple NEUP or Nuclear Energy University Program scholarships and university grants, I was able to afford the chance to earn my bachelor's degree in nuclear engineering from the University of Illinois. And I am now a current nuclear engineering PhD candidate at the University of Tennessee. And I want to address the previous comments concerning the safety of nuclear power in our communities. I know that the history of uranium mining is a shameful one, and it's one that the EPA is working to address through dispersing hundreds of millions of dollars in retroactive cleanup grants. And I also know that long-term geologic storage of waste is a major point of political contention that has resulted in the indefinite temporary storage of used nuclear fuel in above ground dry casks. And I will actually be visiting San Onofre myself this coming Sunday to visit their used fuel with the intention of posting educational information about nuclear waste. So if anybody, has questions about San Onofre waste handling specifically, feel free to post questions in the comments, and I'll try to get to them while I'm there on Sunday. But, there have been multiple, there's a plane. Okay. There have been multiple instances of people on this call requesting for the NRC to be more transparent, to provide more educational content. And I think that, there's a possible realistic way to do so through publicizing the monitoring of extremely low-level radiation released from basically all nuclear activities. There have been kind of a common theme that I've been seeing between, people's real concerns about, even the most recent comment about radiation in schools, radiation from fuel fabrication, from waste storage, from, Indian Point has been mentioned more than once, and everybody knows about, the news articles about leaks from Indian Point. So I think, if we publicize and take ownership of that low level radiation and then pair those measurements with metrics for comparison that explain the minimal biological impact of becquerels and what's effectively like microrems of dose to people, that, I think there's going to be less of like a conspiratory mindset about, what are they hiding? And we shouldn't have we don't want the perspective of, well, what are they hiding? We should take ownership of, okay, this happened, it was not great. I'm using kind of Indian Point as an example here to say, this happened and this is the full information of what we can release to the public about how much was released to everybody, what exactly happened at the plant, because a lot of that stuff can be found in formal documents, but it's not easily accessible by the common person, and it should be. We should take the responsibility to be transparent. A little bit, going back to me, I actually grew up just 15 minutes away from Zion Nuclear Generating Station, which, like Indian Point, was also decommissioned. Zion was decommissioned only like a year after I was born, and the consequences for me of living near Zion and of living near the nuclear waste that is still there after Zion was decommissioned wasn't like a consequence related to safety or radiation. It was economic. That plant was a centerpiece of the Zion economy, so its premature shutdown was detrimental to my community. It was detrimental to the schools funded by those property taxes. And still, more than 23 years after the plant was decommissioned, Zion schools still spend about $3,000 less per student than neighboring schools like Grays Lake North and Central. And those economic issues are now being addressed by the state of Illinois, but I wanted to point out the severe impact of prematurely decommissioning a plant and the long-term difficulties that the U.S. has experienced in our efforts to address them, not just at Zion, but for the communities of other plants that have been decommissioned as well. Finally, especially if, a plant is located not in a big city, San Onofre isn't going to have a major impact on like the community of San Diego or LA. But for Zion, it's far enough removed from Chicago where it did have a major impact on the people that live in that area. Finally, I do want to address one of the concerns of the Nuclear Information and Resource Service representative, because climate change is no small villain. In 2019, fossil fuels comprised 84% of the energy consumed worldwide. And as developing nations improve their citizens' quality of life, demand for energy continues to escalate and it is currently predicted that energy demand will double by 2055. And right now we're seeing the biggest growth from, yes, renewables, but also from natural gas. Nuclear renewables need to work together to replace fossil fuels. If we keep fighting each other over, who we should build more of, then that's just a distraction to allow fossil fuels to grow in the background. And this kind of draws back to Eric Meyer's comment in the very beginning that it's vital for the NRC.
Ms. Hayes?
I'm on the last sentence.
Ms. Hayes? I'll have to stop you there. We have a couple more people in the queue, and we're close to...
I have one line. I'm reading off of a script, and this is one line. It's the last one.
Last line? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Going back to Eric Meyer's comment, that it's vital for the NRC to enable the efficient deployment of new reactors, particularly of small modular reactors. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Next caller, please.
Our next question or comment comes from Pamela Greenlaw. Your line is open.
I'm sorry, I stepped away for a minute. I apologize. I do think that we have moved away from the topic a little bit and started doing a back and forth about, do we need nuclear, do we want nuclear, which isn't really the topic here. The topic is about environmental justice and what NRC should do and can do. And so I actually have a question. I don't know if you're going to entertain questions because most of us have just been making statements. NRC has a specific set of responsibilities that to me appears to be limited, that you can do for your agency what you can do, and other agencies who control nuclear decisions and so on, such as NNSA and DOE and DOD, need to do the same sort of policy examination. And I'm not sure, and here's my question, are you talking with those agencies about what their EJ policies are, if they have any? And the second part of my question is, what other government agencies are you looking at as templates or guidelines for your own EJ policy? Would you like me to repeat those?
I think I got them, so let me try, and if I missed something, just let me know. So this is Jessica Bilecki. The first thing you asked is, are we talking to other federal agencies? And we certainly are. We have a pretty extensive benchmarking effort ongoing, reaching out to agencies of various sizes, compositions, and missions. And you asked some of the agencies we're talking to. A few examples include FERC, EPA, DOE, just to name a few. And I think one thing you mentioned that we are very focused on in our review is our statutory mission and what is within our authorities versus other agencies. Other agencies have different authorities. So while we are benchmarking and making comparisons, we're always coming back to our mission and how that fits together.
Well, I'm sure that you are, but what I'm saying is I guess I'm concerned about the influence of those agencies in the nuclear weapons overlap that you all have with them through contracts and through actions that take interagency agreements. And so my suggestion is that NRC stand up. I'm not saying that you're not standing up. Let me say that you be insistent with these other agencies about environmental justice and don't let them water down what you come up with. We're looking forward to a very strong policy, and this the idea of that Reverend Leo and Woodbury and others about the stakeholder process that follows the 17 EJ principles. Are you all familiar with the 17 EJ principles that was developed?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. Right. So my question is, well answered. You are looking at other agencies, but I am concerned about those that are involved in the weapons part where there's overlap really now. There shouldn't have been, but it's like mission creep and industry capture of the very agencies that are supposed to regulate the industry, and it's a struggle, it's a balance, and it's not balanced very well right now. So I'm just hoping that you will insist on having something that's unique and effective that the other agencies will learn from you, that we're trying to help you with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Greenlaw. We have 2 more callers in the queue, so let's get the next one, please.
Our next question or comment comes from Priscilla Preston. Your line is open.
Thank you. My name is Priscilla Preston, and I would like to just say that the whole reason we're having this discussion about environmental justice with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is because nuclear facilities are by definition dangerous. That's why they require regulation. You wouldn't need a regulatory commission in the same way for solar or wind because they don't do the same amount of damage to the environment. It's considered, again, by definition, a polluting industry, just like a fossil fuel plant or a hazardous waste site. So given the fact that you have already acknowledged, by going through this process, you have acknowledged that you're a dangerous industry, that these facilities are dangerous, and we've already gotten the point across that communication is a problem. So if we have the advisory committee as suggested by Reverend Woodbury, I think the first thing to consider is, given the fact that we have acknowledged that this is dangerous, what can be done to protect the people once something has been identified, such as the uranium and TC-99 in the groundwater in Lower Richland? What can people do to protect themselves? Do they need to test their well water? If so, how do they test their well water? Which companies are reliable to test the well water? How can they determine any other contaminants that would relate to the cumulative effects? So that's my primary concern about how we communicate the safety issues and how people can respond to these safety issues. Thank you for having this panel discussion.
Thank you. Your comments and your concerns are noted. And we will take our last caller now.
Our last question or comment comes from Diane Dorigo. Your line is open.
I'm a comment. Hold on. I just dumped something. Hold on. I wanted to, Diane Dorigo, Nuclear Information and Resource Service, and I wanted to read 3 sentences, which I can't find them real quick. I will just paraphrase that. Basically, the NRC, I'm going to have to paraphrase. So I mentioned in my first round of comments, and it's come up with others, that environmental justice doesn't start from today. There's a history. And the Navajo Nation, the Dene, have just filed suit in international court on human rights violations having to do with previous practices with uranium in their nations. And so it's clear from an objective perspective that there's a legal argument being made. We can talk about how previous wrongs have not been corrected. Now we've got a situation where the nation has made a statement against more uranium mining. There's been a license granted by the NRC, and there's a challenge. So I am long to speak for others, but no one has brought this up, and I think that it's worth being on the record that there's a legal challenge to current and previous NRC activities that are clearly human rights and environmental justice are very intertwined. Thank you.
Thank you. While you were giving your comment, two other commenters have entered the queue, and those will be our last commenters for the evening. And we have at least one other message for everyone before we adjourn the meeting. So let's take the next two callers, and then we will give you some other messages that we'd like to share.
Our next question or comment comes from Ernico Brown. The line is open.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, my name is Ernico Brown, and I'm the ECJ chair here on behalf of the NAACP, the South Carolina State Conference in South Carolina. And I really just want to say that everybody has said so many things about the need and the urgency around this. And the only thing that I really want to say is I went and looked at your website, and it says the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission was created as an independent agency by Congress in 1974 to ensure the safe use of radioactive material for beneficial civilian purposes while protecting people and the environment. The issues that are going on down in Lower Richland, if we're having to do all of these things, then it's not beneficial and it's not protecting. If we're having to do all these cleanups, then it's not helping. As far as the NRC and learning what an environmental justice community is, I think that it is high time that individuals really understand the people, the pain, and the process of what these people are dealing with. To have these things in communities that aren't beneficial to the community and having it be a compound injustice because a particular community like the Lower Richland community, there's a paper mill plant, there are several different things. Always having these things in low-income communities aren't beneficial to the community. Yes, they bring about some economic development, but what good is that economic development if you're killing the people in the process? And how do we protect the people not only in that community, but in other communities where these nuclear places are placed? How do we protect the people who aren't at the table, who can't have access to having their voices heard? How do we bring about a change in the communities that are beneficial to everyone and not just the people who are profiting off of these communities? I think that we really need to stop building and stop pouring money into these plants or have these plants in communities where people who have access would have them. These plants are almost always placed in low-income, low-wealth communities that are environmental justice communities. And this issue is not only a environmental justice issue, this is a civil rights issue, a human rights issue, and we really need to stop looking at the profits and start seeing the people, because the people are being affected tremendously, and there needs to be a change in what's going on. And I feel like a multi-agency conversation should be had, and people should be educated. I think that the people who sit in these offices are never the people who are sitting and living in these communities. And it should be more than this one-off conversation about what's going on. I really feel like the two gentlemen who came to Columbia, I think that more people need to come, more education needs to be had, and people need a real opportunity, and I really think that these agencies who are over these regulations and these commissions really need to come to these communities and see what's going on and see what's happening in these communities and how people are impacted and affected by what you're regulating. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Last caller, please.
Our last question or comment comes from Brian Campbell. Your line is open.
Yes, hello. Thank you for letting me speak. Ed Lyman organization, Union of Concerned Scientists, has references the father of climate change awareness, James Hansen, a leading climate scientist and director of NASA Institute for Space Studies, testified before Congress that scientific data confirmed humans' role in climate change. That same year, 1988, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was created. I suggest that the $42 million a year Union of Concerned Scientists take James Hansen off their website, since when he was a NASA scientist under the Obama administration in 2013, he and another scientist did a study that said that because of nuclear power, 1.8 million lives were saved. Well, I'm just hoping that Ed disagrees with that finding, so it's obvious the Obama administration let that slip through some way. I don't know why. So I was a member of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club is definitely against nuclear power, as is the Union of Concerned Scientists. The Sierra Club has a much bigger, almost $1 billion a year budget. They promoted the shutdown of Indian Point nuclear plant, along with Governor Cuomo. And Governor Cuomo got significant campaign contributions from the natural gas industry. And he built 2 new power plants, 2018 and 2020, to take over the generation of Indian Point. But Indian Point put so much power out, and it was prematurely closed, that we had rolling blackouts in New York City on June 30th this year, after Indian Point was closed. And that has directly involved with delivering power for AC and other things in New York City. As far as environmental justice goes, well, those 2 plants that were built still can't take over Indian Point's electrical generation. So we have to have more generation done in Asmill Alley in Brooklyn, at Ravenswood, and Astoria natural gas plants. But they also can burn oil, which is going to have to be done, which is 2 micron particle pollution. That's right. And that's in New York City. And then we have Newburgh, another environmental justice community. We're going to build a 500 megawatt Dascamer power plant there that's going to take over from the old one that's there currently that's not generating. And that's going to be a new gas plant in that environmental justice community. And when it comes down to it, you take away nuclear power, you're killing people. And you're also putting the electrical grid in severe unreliable power situation. So these people in New York City, they're going to be getting more blackouts. At the same time, we have the natural gas prices are peaking. We have to pay a lot more for natural gas. It's gone up 90% just this year. 90%. Never mind the other fossil fuels. Coal has gone up about 60%. Though that makes nuclear a lot more affordable. But Indian Point was a profitable plant to begin with. But now it's closed, so now we're going to have more emissions, and that's going to affect environmental justice communities in New York City. So thank you for allowing me to speak. And James Hansen, the father of climate change awareness, to me, he is putting out accurate information. And when you have the money of the Sierra Club, by the way, the Sierra Club took $26 million from Chesapeake Gas in 2012. It's one of the reasons why I don't support the Sierra Club. And not only that, the Sierra Club sells solar panels. So their interests are not in nuclear power by any means.
Mr. Campbell, we will have to ask you.
And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you very much. With that, we are wrapping up right now. I want to ask everyone to remember to fill out their participation forms and let us know how this meeting worked for you. If you have written comments, please, we're still taking comments, get those in. I'm going to now turn it over to Jessica Delecky for some additional information before we close for the evening.
Great.
Jessica.
Thanks, Larnice. And once again, thank you all for your attendance tonight. I know our meeting is running late, and we appreciate you listening. We appreciate you engaging. We heard a lot today. Just going through my list, information about impacts on communities, past and present, climate change, challenges related to accessing information, outreach, engagement, concerns related to cumulative impacts and communications, as well as a whole host of recommendations about, for example, creation of an advisory committee, proactively providing education, looking at an anti-environmental racism policy, our adjudicatory proceedings, policy statement revisions, engagement with agencies as well as communities, just to name a few. So thank you, all things we will be considering carefully as we continue with our analysis and prepare our report to the Commission later in February of this year. And so real quick before we break, separate from this EJ effort, I'd like to take a moment to highlight another opportunity where the NRC is seeking feedback, and this is on our transformation initiative. Again, this is separate from what we're doing, but wanted to share this with everyone. So next slide, please. For the last few years, NRC has been focused on transforming the way that we do business to become a more modern, risk-informed regulator. To check in to see how we're doing, the NRC is seeking feedback from external stakeholders on our transformation efforts. For example, what do you think about our efforts, and are there suggestions to tailor future transformation activities? Next slide, please. So to provide comments on the transformation effort, you can go to our public website and enter Transformation Survey in the search bar, or you can call 1-800-638-8080. Again, 1-800-638-8081, and leave a verbal comment anytime between now and March 31st. So that's all I have. Thanks again for listening in, for engaging, and we hope you all enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone, for your time and your respect. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.